Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress with the next video in the countdown towards the resumption of the 2020 Candidates Tournament, which was cut short in March because of the COVID-19 pandemic. On Chess to Impress, we're counting down towards the great event by looking at the 29 earlier candidate cycles in the history of the World Championship. This is episode number 12, and you can find all my earlier videos on the 2020 World Championship up here. It all started in London in 1883, where Zukertort and Steinitz won the tournament, and they played the first official World Championship match 3 years later. Steinitz gained a rematch against world champion Lasker in the St. Petersburg tournament in 1895-1896, and Paul Keres won the event in the Netherlands 1938 for a match against world champion Aljochin, but he never got that match because of World War II. The first official candidates tournament was held in Budapest and Moscow in 1950. David Bronstein was the winner. Vasily Smyslov won 2 candidate cycles in Zurich 1953 and Amsterdam 1956. Misha Tal was the next challenger of world champion Botvinnik, and Petrosyan won Curaçao 1962. He became world champion 1 year later. The candidates tournaments were then changed into candidates matches, and Boris Spassky won the first 2 installments in 1965 and 1968. Bobby Fischer won the next candidate cycle and became world champion by beating Spassky in a match of the century. Anatoly Karpov beat Viktor Korchnoi in Moscow 1974 and became world champion by default because Fischer refused to defend his title under the FIDE regulations. We have that there in red because we're going to look at a game from the Karpov-Korchnoi candidates final in this video. Viktor Korchnoi won the next 2 cycles, lost both times to Karpov in a World Championship match, and Garry Kasparov came on the scene in 1984 and was the 13th world champion 1 year later. Karpov came back by winning the next 2 cycles for matches 4 and 5 against Kasparov, and in 1993 Nigel Short beat Jan Timman and became Kasparov's next opponent in a World Championship match. Anand gained the right to challenge Kasparov in 1995, and it should have been Alexei Shirov to be Kasparov's next challenger. He beat Kramnik in Cazorla in 1998, but he never got a match. Kramnik did and became world champion by beating Kasparov in London in the year 2000. Peter Leko was Kramnik's first challenger, and in 2007 we had a World Championship tournament. Aranyan, Gelfand, Grishuk and Leko qualified for that tournament, which was won by Anand. Topalov, Gelfand and Carlsen were Anand's next opponents. Carlsen dethroned Vishwanathan Anand and became the 16th world champion. Anand came back for a rematch against Carlsen, and Karyakin and Caruana were Carlsen's last challengers. Who will it be? Yekaterinburg 2020. Who will win that tournament and gain the right to challenge Magnus Carlsen for the world title? As mentioned, we're going back to the cycle of 1973-1974. There were 2 interzonals. The first one was held in Leningrad, St. Petersburg, and the 3 players in green qualified for the candidates tournament: Korchnoi, Karpov and Robert Byrne. You can see the players that missed out. Some famous names there: Bent Larsen, Misha Tal, Mark Taimanov, who played an important role in earlier candidate cycles. The second interzonal was held in Petropolis in Brazil in 1973, and it was won by a Brazilian, Enrique Mecking. I'm sure my faithful viewer Mateus Penteado is very happy to see this tournament table. Geller, Pologievsky and Portis had to play a playoff for 2 places in the candidate matches, as they all finished on 11.5 points in joint second place. Pologievsky and Portis won the playoff. Geller missed out. And again, some famous names below that: Smyslov, Bronstein. They did not make it to the candidates matches this time. This is the bracket of the candidates matches. Karpov beat Pologievsky, Spassky beat Byrne, Korchnoi beat Mecking, sorry Mateus, and Petrosyan beat Portis. In the semi-finals, Karpov overcame Spassky and Korchnoi beat Petrosyan, who forfeited the match after 3 losses. He could still have come back, as Korchnoi needed 1 more win, but Petrosyan had enough. In the finals, Karpov narrowly beat Viktor Korchnoi, and here we have a picture from that match. held in Moscow, we see Karpov and we see Korchnoi on the back. And this is a wonderful picture. From the first game, Korchnoi has just played c4. Karpov is thinking about his reply. But look at the audience. Those were the days. Full auditoriums with eager spectators. No people sitting behind their computers at home. No COVID-19 regulations. Just people getting together to watch chess. In this video we're going to look at game 21 from that match played on November 11th, 1974. And I'm using the annotations from former world champion Mikhail Botvinnik for this video. Korchnoi was white, Karpov was black. Karpov was leading the match by 11 points to 9. He was 2 points ahead, but he had lost his last game with black. Only 4 more games to be played of this 24-game match. Korchnoi had to win. He played d4, knight f6 from Karpov, knight f3 from Korchnoi, e6, g3, b6, bishop g2 and bishop b7. We have a Queen's Indian on the board. c4, bishop e7, knight c3 and Karpov castled. And here is a very interesting comment from Botvinnik. He says, evidently Karpov's exhaustion had begun to tell, and this is not surprising. After all, this was the 21st match game, and it's difficult for a chess player to play more than 20 games at full strength. At such a critical moment of the match, Black ought to have avoided those tense situations that can arise in the Queen's Indian defense, and which were repeated in hypertrophied form in this game. And that is indeed a very interesting comment. Of course, Botvinnik knows, like nobody else, how exhausted players can be in a match after 20 games. But Karpov was 23 years old, and he was 20 years younger than his opponent. And all Botvinnik talks about is Karpov's exhaustion. But he was probably right, because Korchnoi was a man of steel. Queen c2 was played by Korchnoi, c5, d5, e takes d5 and knight g5. And Karpov played knight c6. Here Botvinnik writes, in the 5th game, Black played g7, g6 on the 9th move and obtained a satisfactory conclusion. Evidently, after home analysis, Karpov had found an improvement for white in case of g7, g6 and therefore varies his play. But the move knight c6 proves to be an unsuccessful novelty. In his comments on this game in volume 1 of Korchnoi's best games, Korchnoi relates that he had prepared for the present game along with Bronstein. After 9 g6 they had planned the move 10 h2 h4. But as said, knight c6 was played by Karpov. Korchnoi took on d5, gets the pawn back. Now g6 and queen d2. Botvinnik writes, this strong move Korchnoi had most probably prepared already before the match. But he could not employ it earlier, since Karpov avoided the continuation, knight c6 on the 9th move. And here now, at the finish, Korchnoi finally gained the possibility of exploiting his clever preparation. The queen at d2 first of all defends the knight on g5, but simultaneously creates a more hidden and dangerous threat. And Botvinnik says that Karpov should have played rook e8 here, but he played knight takes d5, and that move gets a question mark from Botvinnik. He writes, played after 8 minutes, it's not necessary to calculate any variations in order to assess how dangerous a position the opponent's light-squared bishop occupies at d5. And that's why Botvinnik says rook e8 should have been played, and for the time being no immediate threat to black is apparent. But with that bishop on d5, black is already in trouble, explains Botvinnik. And here, rook b8 was played, another move that gets a question mark from Botvinnik. He writes, it is clear that not only had Karpov lost his sense of danger, but that at this point he simply could not calculate variations. The most logical was, of course, to take on g5, and then queen takes, bishop takes, and either king g7 or knight a5, says Botvinnik. With a difficult endgame for black, but really, in this match had Karpov not demonstrated defensive skill in endgames. Karpov had defended a few very difficult endgames successfully. But rook b8 was played after only 3 minutes of thought. And it was young Garry Kasparov, 11 years old, on the 11th of November 1974 who was in the auditorium for the first time in his life, and he looked at the demonstration board and he saw the winning move for Korchnoi, and Korchnoi found it as well, and he corked out knight takes h7 on the 13th move, a big slap in Karpov's face. You cannot take the knight. You get checkmated after that move. Botvinnik shows his variation. Queen h6 check. King g8 only move. Queen takes g6, and there we see the power of that bishop on d5. The f-pawn is pinned. King h8, queen h6 check, king g8, bishop e4, threatening checkmate with queen h7. So f5 has to be played. The bishop returns to d5 with check. Yes, that is a monstrous bishop indeed. Rook f7, queen g6 check, and Botvinnik says mate is not far off. I know we all like to see a mate, so let's look at how this leads to checkmate. I'll give you the first line of the engine. King h8, bishop takes f7, nothing can help black. Queen f8, let's play that move. Another check, king g7, the bishop on c1 comes into play, king f6, another queen g6 check move. King has to go into open space, bishop f4 check, king d4, and a very fancy move, castling queenside with check, king e4, and checkmate with a pawn. So it's pretty clear that after knight takes h7, that knight cannot be taken. Karpov saw that, he could calculate some variations and played rook e8, taking the rook out of the attack of the knight. But there comes the queen anyway. Knight e5 and knight g5, threatening mate in 2 with queen h7, king f8, and then queen h8 would be checkmate. So the only move is to take off the knight. Bishop takes g5, played by Karpov. Korchnoi recaptured on g5, attacking the black queen, and the black queen cannot move because of bishop f6 and then mate on g7. Karpov had no choice, he had to sacrifice his queen to avoid being checkmated. Queen takes, bishop takes d5, and Korchnoi still had to be careful. Why can you not just recapture on d5? If you want to put the video on pause and see what the refutation of c takes d5 is, Karpov's last trick. Yes indeed, it is knight f3 check. It is a fork on king and queen, and the pawn on e2 is pinned, cannot take the knight. And after king f1, knight takes g5, it will be black who wins this game of chess. Korchnoi did not fall for that. After bishop takes d5, he did not recapture on d5, he just castled kingside. As Botvinnik writes, black has 2 minor pieces for the queen, clearly insufficient compensation. Karpov took on c4, a dying man can eat anything, but after f2, f4 on the 19th move, Karpov resigned. Botvinnik says undoubtedly the weakest game in the match, and it is quite startling that this whole game took only just over an hour. Korchnoi only used 24 minutes for his 19 moves, while Karpov used 38 minutes. Quite unique for a decisive game at this level. Despite his exhaustion, Karpov was able to get himself together. He drew the last 3 games and won the match by the odd point, and gained the right to challenge world champion Bobby Fischer for the world title. And unfortunately for all chess fans, that match never took place. Karpov became the 12th world champion by default. I hope you enjoyed this video, and that if you did, you'll give the video a thumbs up, that you'll subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel, and that you'll leave a comment. I will read them all and I will reply to them all. If you like the video, it would be great if you could share it on social media by clicking the share button on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram, on Twitter and on Facebook. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.